Hello, and welcome to another episode of AI in the Classroom Daily. This is a podcast helping educators make sense of AI without the hype. I'm Dan Cogan-Drew, co-founder and chief academic officer here at Newsella, and I use AI as a thinking partner in preparing these episodes because I think the best way to talk honestly about AI in education is to work with it openly. So over the past year, I've been digging into what's actually happening when schools hand teachers an AI tool, what's happening in their classrooms. Two separate investigations, one from Georgia's Education Department and one from researchers at the University of Pennsylvania, are telling us the same thing, and both reveal a problem that I think explains a lot of the confusion around AI in schools today. Today's episode is timely because this week, Anthropic released Claude for Teachers. It's integrated with platforms like Brisk and Magic School that help teachers generate instructional materials. Google and Microsoft have similar tools, and the pitch from all of them, I think, is the same, which is, as a teacher, this saves you time. You can use AI to handle the heavy lifting on lesson prep. So let's start with where we are today. According to the Gallup and Walton Family Foundation survey from last year, 60% of U.S. K-12 teachers are now using AI. About a third of them use it weekly. School districts aren't waiting around. KBM Learning released data showing districts are rolling out AI tools at scale right now. The logic driving all of it is that AI is a productivity tool. It's going to save teachers time on things like writing lesson plans, creating assessments, drafting materials. And the logic is that if teachers have more time, they can redirect that time to what actually matters, building relationships with students, thinking through how to teach something better, getting feedback from students, and actually improving their craft. That's the theory, but we haven't actually tested what happens when you hand teachers an AI tool. Now we have some answers. In June, the Georgia Department of Audits and Accounts released a report based on a survey of more than 13,000 teachers across the state. What they found is fascinating because it contains a real contradiction. The headline is that 59% of Georgia teachers use AI for teaching tasks. 95% of those use it for instructional planning and preparation at least a few times a year, and more than half use it every week. Nearly 90% of teachers who use AI report that it has a positive impact on their classrooms. Seems obvious, why would they use it? They say it saves them time, improves their instructional materials, and increases student participation. So these teachers clearly feel that AI is working for them. The audit at the same time reveals something else. They asked about student outcomes, and when you look at what they said, the picture changes a bit. Teachers whose students are using AI report that the technology has had a negative impact on student learning. In fact, a majority of middle and high school teachers reported that AI had a very negative or somewhat negative impact on their students' learning. So we have this strange split. Teachers think AI is helping them do their job, but they also report that it's hurting student outcomes. Teachers expressed concerns about student over-reliance on the technology, and they worried about damage to critical thinking skills. They were worried about cheating. They worried about academic integrity. And a lot of them tried to manage the problem by requiring in-class work or by using software to detect AI-generated assignments. We've talked about a lot of this on this show. For all of the self-reporting from Georgia teachers of the positive effects of their own use of AI and the negative effects of their students' use of AI, which I think to date we've seen a lot of documentation of, I think an interesting question is what can be said about the actual impact of teacher use of AI on students? And when teachers are expressing these concerns about student use of AI, could it be that teachers are engaging in some of these very same habits in their own use of AI? So let's dive into this study. A team of researchers at the University of Pennsylvania set out to test this question. The lead researcher is Alp Sungu, working with Benjamin Lira and Angela Duckworth. We're going to spend some time diving into the study and its results because it's the first of its kind to take a really thoughtful look at the student impact of teacher use of AI. So here's the setup. The researchers ran a proper randomized controlled trial with 538 teachers across a network of schools in Turkey. These teachers collectively taught more than 4,500 students across grades 5 through 12. The experiment ran for one semester in the spring of 2025. The researchers randomly assigned teachers at the school department level. So all the math teachers at one school would be in the same condition. All the English teachers at another school would be in a different condition. This matters because, as we know, teachers in the same department share resources and talk to each other. So you want to separate them to avoid spillover effects. There were three conditions. First, control, business as usual. No AI tool, no special training, nothing. Second, AI access. Teachers had credentials for a custom-built AI tool. The tool was powered by GPT-4, and it had access to a curated database of instructional materials from the Turkish Ministry of Education. They got 1 hour of training on how to use it, no ongoing reminders, no usage targets, and no one checking in on them. The third was AI access plus a reminder. That's the same tool and training as the AI access group, but they also got weekly emails with personalized usage stats and encouragement to keep using it. So they're testing both whether access to AI matters and whether nudging teachers to use it more also matters. The tool had 12 presets. Teachers could use general GPT, or they could use structured templates for specific tasks like lesson planning and creating assignments. What the researchers wanted here was to give teachers both freedom and structure. And they measured a bunch of things. They measured student intrinsic motivation, how interested students were, how important they found the material, and how enjoyable the class was. They measured student confidence, how well they thought they could do, how much they felt they'd improved. They measured academic performance, standardized exam scores. They measured teachers' own usage patterns, how often they used the tool, what they used it for, how deep the conversations were. And they asked teachers about their beliefs in AI. Did they think it helped or hurt student learning? They ran the experiment for 1 semester, which is about 4 months of actual teaching. Here's what they found. Providing teachers with AI reduced student intrinsic motivation. The effect size was about 0.11 standard deviations. It's not enormous, but in education research, it's meaningful. To put it another way, students in classes where teachers had AI access rated their classes as less interesting, less important, and less enjoyable than students whose teachers didn't have AI. When the researchers broke this down by item, they found all 5 items pointed in the same direction. Every single measure of motivation went down. The largest effect was on subject importance. Students thought the subject mattered less when their teacher had access to AI. You might ask, was this effect the same across all teachers? And the answer is no. It was worse among teachers who reported using AI heavily before the experiment. So if you were already an AI user before the study started, your students' motivation dropped even more. If you were new to AI, the drop was smaller. The researchers propose that teachers who use AI more heavily are using it for generation more than revision. They're generating lesson plans, homework, and so on. They're not iterating. They're not improving things based on what they know about their students. The more you do that, the more generic your instruction becomes. And students notice. And when they notice, they disengage. So now motivation is one thing, but there's another finding that's just as concerning, if not more. Students' confidence decrease, particularly among students whose teachers were below median performers. When the researchers say below median, what they mean is that these were teachers whose students had performed worse on baseline exams. So if you think about that as a weaker teacher, a teacher for who, whatever reason, isn't as effective, those students showed a confidence decline of 0.183 standard deviations, nearly double the overall motivation effect. So what does that mean? Students thought they were worse at the subject. They thought they couldn't do the work. They lost confidence in their abilities to succeed in the class. Now, this wasn't true for students of above median teachers. Students of stronger teachers didn't show this confidence decline. Now, obvious question is why? The researchers propose a mechanism that they're calling skill substitution. When a weaker teacher gets an AI tool, they're more likely to use it for task delegation. They ask the AI to write a lesson plan and then they use it. They don't have the pedagogical expertise to know whether what the AI generated is actually good or whether it fits their students' needs or whether it's missing something important. They just accept it. Here's the thing though, when a student experiences instruction from a teacher who doesn't deeply understand the material or who isn't thinking carefully about how to teach it, the student may pick up on that. The student may think, my teacher doesn't really know this, and if my teacher doesn't know it, maybe I can't learn it either. That's confidence erosion. So motivation is down, confidence is down. How about actual learning? Did students learn less? On average, the answer is no. The effect on academic performance was basically 0. But, and this is important, the average masks a huge variation. Among students of below median teachers, AI reduced academic performance by 0.129 standard deviations, which is a real effect. These students actually learned less. They scored lower on their standardized exams. Among the students of above median teachers, the effect was slightly positive, though not statistically significant. So for stronger teachers, AI didn't hurt performance, maybe it helped a little. So why might the average be 0 when these are opposing effects? Researchers have 2 suggestions. First, the exams in Turkish schools have a ceiling effect. The control group average was 89.2 out of 100. Nearly half the students scored 95 or above. 12% got perfect scores. So if AI had helped high-performing students, there was nowhere for them to go. You can't improve past 100. This means the study was designed to detect harm, but not benefit. Second theory, motivation might not be immediately transferable to test performance. Student motivation today might show up in learning a month from now or next year. The study was 1 semester. The full impact might not have emerged yet. The key point, though, is for weaker teachers, their students actually performed worse academically. So how were teachers actually using the tool? The researchers analyzed 13,000 conversations between teachers and the system. They categorized each one by what the teacher was trying to accomplish. 66% of conversations were about teaching material preparation, lesson planning, creation of homework, exam writing, and so on. Only 16% were about instructional support. How do I differentiate? What kind of feedback do I give? How do I correct misconceptions? Teachers were rarely using it as a thinking partner about how to actually help students learn. So the thing that really matters is the conversation depth. How much back and forth happened, given the frame in which these teachers were using it. The median was only 2 prompts. That is, a teacher would ask the AI for something, get the output, and that was that. Some conversations went longer, but the median tells you what's typical. Most of the time, teachers accepted what the AI gave them and moved on. The researchers note that this is consistent with what they would call a task delegation model. Teachers are using AI to outsource the work. They're not using it to think through problems. They're not iterating. They're not testing ideas. They're not revising based on what they know about their students. So when the researchers step back, they propose 2 mechanisms for why AI is having these negative effects. I think this is crucial for understanding what's going on here. Mechanism 1, cognitive offloading. When a teacher delegates the thinking work to AI, they're investing less cognitive effort in the pedagogical reasoning that makes materials effective. A good lesson plan isn't just a sequence of activities. It's built on understanding what students already think about the topic, where they get confused. We've talked about this before. This is pedagogical content knowledge. If you simply use AI to generate that lesson plan in 2 prompts, you're not doing that cognitive work. You're skipping the thinking that builds your expertise as a teacher. This explanation explains why weaker teachers are hit hardest. Lower performing teachers are least equipped to critically evaluate what AI generates. They don't have the expertise to say, this is good, but it's missing this piece, or this example won't work for my students. So they just use it. And they never develop the judgment to know the difference between adequate and actually good. That's what the researchers are calling the skill substitution problem. Over time, if you use AI to avoid the cognitive work of teaching, your teaching skill doesn't develop. It might actually erode. Mechanism 2, what the researchers call loss of personal voice. And this is the other mechanism, and it's about what students experience. The AI-generated materials are technically adequate. They're correct and organized, but they're generic. They're the kind of lesson plan that could work in any classroom. A teacher's personal style is built from years of experience, from knowing what jokes land, what examples resonate, what pace works for their personality. When students experience materials that don't carry that personal imprint, they notice the materials feel impersonal and they feel like they're made by a machine, which they were. And students respond to that. It's especially true if students are used to their teacher's voice. The researchers note that the experiment took place mid-year. So students had spent the fall semester getting to know their teacher's style. And then in the spring, when the teachers started using AI-generated materials, students really noticed the difference. The materials felt inauthentic, and as a result, the students disengaged. The researchers cite research on the importance of personal relationships in learning. Education isn't some kind of transactional behavior where the teacher just delivers information. Students learn better when they have a positive and meaningful personal relationship with their teacher. When materials don't carry the teacher's personality, the relationship becomes more distant. So we have 2 distinct problems, one about teacher skill and one about student experience. They both matter, and they probably require different solutions. So where it gets really interesting is when the researchers ask teachers, what do you think AI does to student learning? On average, teacher beliefs didn't change, despite everything that we've just said. Teachers who thought AI was helpful still thought that at the end. Teachers who were skeptical stayed skeptical. But when researchers looked at the subgroup, something surprising was revealed. And that is that teachers who had used AI heavily before the experiment started, they became more pessimistic. Their beliefs shifted downward. They went from thinking AI might help to thinking it probably hurts. Teachers who were new to AI, who had used it lightly before, they became more optimistic. They went from being skeptical to thinking, maybe this could work. Why? The researchers propose an answer. When you first discover AI, you think it's amazing. It responds to anything you ask. It generates stuff instantly. You think, this could transform my teaching. But then you use it for a few months. You see what it actually does in your classroom. Your students are less engaged. You notice the materials feel generic, and you start to see the problems. You become skeptical. The teachers who were already using AI before the study, they were more likely to notice these problems because they had more experience. and they became more pessimistic as a result. The teachers who were new to AI hadn't figured out yet that the tool was hurting student learning. They were still in this is amazing honeymoon phase, so they stayed optimistic. It's actually the opposite of what typically happens with new technology. Usually familiarity breeds acceptance. You get used to something and like it more over time, but with AI and teaching, the pattern appears to be reversed. The more you pay attention, the more skeptical you become. So what we actually learned from this study: when you give teachers access to AI without changing anything else about how they work, student motivation drops. Student confidence drops, especially for students of weaker teachers. Academic performance drops for students of weaker teachers. Teachers use the tool primarily for generation and not revision. And experienced AI users become more pessimistic, while novices stay optimistic. This isn't really a story about AI being bad. It's a story about what happens when you introduce a time-saving tool into a system where teachers are already stretched thin and don't have time to use it thoughtfully. The tool enables passive use, and passive use has real consequences for students. It might actually prevent teachers from developing the expertise they need. So where do we go from here? What do we do? First, I think we have to acknowledge the problem. AI companies and their integration partners are pushing this use case. Georgia showed us it's taking root. Sunggu showed us the mechanism by which it's happening. Teachers feel like AI is helping them. Their students are experiencing less engaging, less motivating, less effective instruction, and that's a big gap that matters. Second, we have to figure out what thoughtful teacher use of AI actually looks like, because the implication isn't don't use AI, it's don't use it passively. Third, we need to understand who's most vulnerable. It's not all teachers equally. It's weaker teachers, teachers under time pressure, teachers who haven't yet developed the expertise to know what good looks like. And fourth, we need to think about teacher preparation. Because if revision is how teachers develop expertise, and if AI is shortcutting revision, then we might be undermining teacher development at a moment when it matters most, when teachers are learning to teach. So over the next 3 episodes, this is what we're going to explore. Episode 2 is about principles. What does thoughtful AI actually look like? What does thoughtful teacher use of AI actually look like? What are the conditions under which a teacher can use AI without outsourcing the thinking? Episode 3 is going to be about early career teachers, why they're the most vulnerable, why the stakes are highest for them, and what they actually need. And episode 4 is going to go further upstream. It's going to look at teacher preparation, about why the struggle of learning to teach matters, and what we might be risking if we start using AI to shortcut that struggle. So, we covered a lot today. I wanted to take extra time on this research because, again, it's the first of its kind in an area that we can see matters deeply. In closing, I want to know what you're seeing. If you've seen passive AI use in your school, what does it look like? What have you noticed? How have you realized that it was passive? When have you seen a teacher pull back and actually do the cognitive work themselves? And what made the difference in those 2 different applications of AI? Please share your thoughts in the comments. This is the right time to have this conversation while we have a moment to think and breathe and step back from the day-to-day, because when we hit the classroom in the fall, this is going to matter tremendously. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in our next episode.